They thought they had the votes to pass the farm bill, but failed. And it comes just as immigration appears to have huge momentum coming out of the Senate. There, it looks like 70 votes is now possible for a deal. Now, the breakthrough came when the Gang of Eight joined Senators Corker and Hoeven to back an amendment on border security. And 15 Republican senators could side with nearly all the Democrats to pass immigration reform.
We secure the border so we're not back in this situation where we have millions of illegal immigrants in this country 10 years down the road.
But that's the Senate. Back to the House, where Speaker Boehner's miscalculation on the farm bill may not bode well for more complicated negotiations like immigration. Republicans blame Democrats. Democrats bash the GOP.
What is happening on the floor today was a demonstration of major amateur hour.
It is pathetic that the Republican whip team would be trying to point fingers at others when what you see is their latest inability and failure to govern.
In order to lose control of the floor, Martin, you have to have had control in the first place. And I just don't think that Speaker Boehner has had control of his caucus and of this Congress.
Now, in its simplest form, the farm bill failed because very conservative Republicans voted against it because they said it cost too much. Democrats voted against it because it cut too much from food stamps. I want to bring in Reed Wilson, the editor-in-chief of National Journal's Hotline, and Shira Toeplitz, Roll Call's politics editor. Good Friday morning to you both.
Hey, Chris.
Good morning. So, really quick, I want to play for you, in case you missed it, what Adam Schiff just said on the Daily Rundown.
As one of my colleagues put it, Speaker Boehner is not running the Republican conference. He's running one step ahead of the mob.
So, Reed, after 2 years of negotiations, how does this happen? Especially to a guy who said he wouldn't bring immigration to the floor if he didn't have the votes, the Hastert rule.
Well, remember, I mean, the Farm Bill, it met the Hastert rule. It had a majority of Republican votes, but this is really a failure of the vote counters on the Republican side. You know, if you're the majority, you don't put a bill on the floor unless you have you've got some kind of guarantee that it's actually going to pass. You didn't see a lot of this happening when the Democrats, when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker. They had a very tight whipper-up operation. When Republicans were in control of Congress, when Dennis Hastert was Speaker before 2006. These sorts of votes rarely, if ever, happened. Sometimes they would keep the votes open for hours while they cajoled members just enough to get to that 218 votes they need to pass a bill. This time, though, we've seen this now 4 or 5 times in which Republicans have lost votes that go to the floor when they expected to win. You know, in a lot of cases, they can say, well, Democrats didn't bring the votes that they had promised. But at the end of the day, I mean, they've got a checklist of where all their members are. They should know where all the votes are coming from. It's embarrassing more than anything else.
Yeah, and frankly, even if they'd gotten the 40 Democratic votes they said that they were promised, it still wouldn't have passed. So that argument is a little bit weak.
Exactly.
John Boehner Shira did an interview with Maria Bartiromo over at CNBC before the vote, and she asked him about the difficulties of being Speaker and the road ahead for immigration. Here's what he said.
As a Speaker, I take a lot of hits. I get a lot of hatchets thrown at my back every day. Listen, it comes with the territory. And if you're going to lead here in Washington, you know, you're going to take some hits. But I've got a good relationship with our members, work closely with them, and I've made clear how we intend to proceed on immigration. I think people are comfortable with it.
But again, Shira, that was done before the Farm Bill vote. Right. Is his speakership in trouble?
Not immediately, I would say. I'd certainly watch after this Congress. We'll see what happens in the 2014 elections. It's also possible that he might not want the job anymore. I think the speakership he envisioned for himself is certainly not the one that he's had. Remember, he ascended the House in the 1990s when Newt Gingrich was Speaker. It was just a very different time, and the caucus was very different then. And essentially, he's dealing with an unwhippable caucus. Yes, it is. I agree with Reed that it is the fault of the vote counters in the Republican caucus. House Whip Kevin McCarthy, his deputies, he's got about a dozen of them. That's true, but in many ways, these members are either not telling the whip leaders how they're going to vote, or there's some kind of communication error going on, and this caucus, as a result, is unwhippable.
Let's talk about the implications this is going to have for immigration. Bob Corker was specifically asked about that yesterday.
I've always learned in life the best way to to be successful is focus on the job at hand, okay? And the job at hand right now is to pass a bill out of the Senate. I hope if we pass a bill out of the Senate, they will take it up, and I hope we'll have a conference which produces a very balanced piece of legislation.
Reed, if they don't get some momentum on the Senate side, meaning 70 votes, is there any chance in the House?
Well, why 70 votes? Why are we talking about whether or not the Senate has any impact on immigration if it gets a big margin? I mean, the Farm Bill passed with 66 votes in the Senate, came to the House and died by 25 votes. So, you know, I'm skeptical of this notion that a big margin in the Senate is going to translate into the House. You know, Marco Rubio and the Republican members of the Gang of Eight have been working very closely with House members, especially the more conservative ones, but they're not getting a great reaction. They're getting a lot of skepticism from Republicans who don't think that this immigration bill is the right way to proceed. So they've got a sales job to do within their own conference. Shira is exactly right. This is an unwhippable conference. And by the way, there are a number of members for whom it's good politics to be against leadership, to say that this bill isn't conservative enough, so I'm going to vote against it, even if House leadership is for it. So this is going to be a fascinating time. In a lot of the commentary on immigration today, people who were saying this bill is going to pass in July, it'll get through the House before the August recess. I'm now seeing people saying, well, if this bill passes at all, and they're talking about a much longer timeline than the one they were talking about just a few weeks ago.
Are they talking about a much longer timeline? Is that what you think, Shira?
Perhaps, but I do think the August recess just looms over members and their schedule. That is a really important deadline because, as we saw with the health care bill, they also spread that over August recess, and all the members went home and they got an earful from their constituents at those town hall meetings. It's really a pivotal time in the congressional calendar. So I think if they have a prayer of passing this bill, time is really the enemy, and they have to get it done before August recess.
All right, Shira Toeplitz, Reed Wilson, thanks to both of you.